Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome back. Today I am doing a video that I actually have been requested to do a lot, and I kind of thought I did it before, but then I realized, like, no, not specifically. So what I'm doing is I'm going to actually be talking about kind of the keys to success in interviews. And I've talked about in the past, if you watch my channel, a lot of keys to success in getting jobs and things like that, but I haven't talked about specifically interviews. I've given a lot of interview feedback and stuff, but I'm going to talk about the key to success for cybersecurity interviews. So if you guys like this content, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. It's the only way to keep growing. We are so close to, skyrocketing at some point if we ever go viral. I don't care that much about that, but I want to get this content out to people that need it. So big thing here is what we're going to talk about. So a couple of things. We're going to talk about communication. We're going to talk about the problem solving, some of the questions, examples, the mindset to go into, the approach you should take, some of the behavior that you should be kind of focusing on, and then what questions you should ask, right? And those are kind of the things that we're going to go through, but really we're going to talk about first is some of the methodologies, right? So one thing to look at is, if you've never heard of it, is this STAR interview process response technique, right? It's a technique you can use to prepare for behavioral or situational interview questions. So one of the most common things you're going to get is you're going to get these behavioral questions, right? And all of these links will be in the description, so feel free if you need to after. But you can see, it's not even on here now anymore. They must have taken it down. But let's do, we'll just say behavioral, what was I typing? Behavioral interview questions, right? And we'll get an example of them. Doesn't really matter what you do. But almost every interview you have is going to have these behavioral interview questions, right? They're going to be, hey, tell me about a time you had to work closely with someone that you struggled with, right? And those are all things that you're going to run into. Almost every interview, whether it's with HR, whether it's with the actual hiring manager, et cetera, are going to run into these. You probably know what I'm talking about if you've ever been in an interview. So there's a method to this, and it's called STAR, right? Situation, task, action, and result. This is super easy. You can see it on Indeed, super simple. So it starts with the situation. So set the stage of what you're about to explain. So if you're saying, the age-old question of, give me a time you found someone difficult to work with and you made it work, and how did it work, right? So set that stage. Well, there was this person, and me and this person didn't see eye to eye on certain things, and here's why we didn't see eye to eye on things. I thought that we should be doing something else. They thought blah, blah, whatever. Set that stage, right? If I don't have any context, if I just go, well, I didn't like this person, and then we went into what we're trying to do, the problem is you don't understand, are you just difficult to work with? Is it that person was difficult to work with, right? Try to avoid things like saying, like, this person was just an idiot, or this person just didn't know what they were doing, or, try not to talk negatively about that person, because when you're talking about somebody to somebody that's completely out of the loop, they're going to think, oh, this person might talk about people like that all the time, and it might cause a problem. So what you want to avoid doing is talking negatively. Just say, this person had ideas that, I personally didn't think were the best, and as far as what we were trying to accomplish, and talk that way, right? So set that stage. You want to really get into the method of making sure that stage, that background, that context is there. Then the task, right? What was the task you were given? And this is really important, because think about certain tasks. If you were told, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to figure out how you work on a team. And if you were like, well, the task we were given is to do X, Y, Z, and I was given the Z part and they were given the X part, and I didn't agree with the way they were doing it, well, at that point, that's not your task, right? So you're kind of going into their territory. And so you want to make sure you explain it in a way that makes sense, where, hey, we're doing XYZ part together, or, whatever the case is. They're trying to find out, why weren't you working with this person well? And then, were you able to make that work regardless? That's really what they want to find out, is when you don't get along with someone, can you still just work normally? Or are you going to be like, this person was an idiot, I don't want to deal with them anymore, etc. So then the action, right? What's the action that you took to get around your issues? So in the case of, hey, we didn't work together well, right? Maybe we were given a task of we had to create a new detection rule. Okay, so you're creating a new detection rule. They thought that we should exclude these users. I thought that we should, put a threshold instead of exclude the users, right? Maybe I thought that the admin users that they wanted to exclude actually should have had a higher threshold of alerts before we got notified of it or something like that, right? How did we work on that action? Well, maybe we compromised. Maybe we sat down and we did a pros and cons list. Maybe we said, you know what? I see your point and you see my point. Let's go with yours and try it. Put it in a probationary period and see if that gets us the result that we want, right? There's all kinds of ways that you could have navigated that concern and that issue. And that's what they want to see is how did you get around it, right? Then the result. They almost always ask, what was the result of that, right? And almost always the answer is, well, it went great after that. We've been, best friends. I was in his wedding. Like it's always dramatic and over the top, right? Try to be honest about it, right? The result was both of us were fairly happy with the result. Neither of us got exactly what we wanted, but at the end of the day, the product worked the way we wanted. The detection rule worked, and we were able to actually detect a couple of attacks later down the road because of this detection rule we created, right? That's more realistic than, well, now we're best friends and he's the greatest guy in the world. Because nobody's buying that, right? So try not to BS. Try to be honest. Try to think of these, go through some of these behavioral questions and think of these things in advance. Don't get hit with one that you're like, oh my God, what? Right? Think about them, right? Have a thought, have a concept. One thing to keep in mind too is it's okay to ask follow-up questions. That's one thing I see all the time is I see people, you ask them a question and they're kind of like, but they instantly want to start answering because they feel like if there's a lull, they're not going to be able to, it's going to be awkward, uncomfortable, etc. Be okay with a lull. Be okay with uncomfortable. I've had people where I've interviewed where I've said, I ask them a question and they say, can I have a second to think about that? And you say, absolutely. And they sit there and sometimes it's for an extended period. When I say extended period, I'm not talking 10 minutes. I'm talking, a full minute, which sounds like a short time, but that's a long time to sit there in silence. But then they come out and they have a very well thought out plan or of attack for that answer. And it's really well done. And that I would much rather that happen than someone just start answering and they're just spitting off. And I see that happen when people get nervous. They just start spitting off things that maybe it's like, hold on, think about that before you answer that. So don't be afraid to ask follow-up questions if you don't fully understand, right? So here's how we handle the behavioral questions, right? And we'll go through some of them as we go on. But now think about the mindset and the approach when you're answering any question, not just communicate or behavioral questions, but we're going to get to the mindset first, and then we're going to talk about the technical questions because the mindset goes with all of it, right? When you're thinking of it, think about the position you're applying for, whether it's, in this case, we're talking about cybersecurity, but this can apply for anything, right? If it's for cybersecurity and they say, hey, let me ask you, give me a time that, you worked well or you worked well with someone you didn't get along with, right? The same question. But think about the mindset of that. If you answer the question of, well, back when I worked at McDonald's 10 years ago, me and this guy got into it, blah, blah, right? Does it answer the question? Sure, it does. But is it a security-minded answer? Think about that. They're looking to see what's this person's mindset. Where are they at all the time, right? A lot of times, you'd be surprised. Some people do interviews in stages, and a lot of times, nobody cares about the answer as much as what you're trying, how you're thinking, right? They're trying to see, when I ask you this question, where does your brain first go? That's what they're trying to see. And if you can have your mind go first to security, right? Like I said, instead of using the McDonald's example, use a detection rule you built with somebody, right? That's a security-minded answer, right? So think of security first when you're answering these questions, even if it may not be something you did on a job, right? Think about when you studied with somebody. Think about if you're in my Discord, how many times, because you can go in there. We disagree all the time, and that's a good thing, right? Think about those things. You can use those examples if they're security oriented versus hey, I worked at McDonald's, and there's nothing wrong with working at McDonald's. I'm just saying in general, you want to tailor those answers to what job you're looking at, right? Think about one of them I get a lot is think about ethical decisions in technical context, right? So I put in here the ISC squared code of ethics. Go through these and understand them. And I know this is the problem with a lot of times when people are interviewing, they're going to say, you're overcomplicating it. This is so much work to just get an interview, da, da, da. Maybe, but I'd much rather be over-prepared than under-prepared. And that's why I've been successful in my career, is because I will over-prepare for something that I under-prepare for, or that I should have under-prepared for, but I'd much rather be over-prepared. So think of these ethical considerations. And I say this because almost every interview I've ever been in, once you start getting in higher level security is, they might ask you an ethical dilemma, or they might ask you, hey, if you could do this, right? Or what do you think of this? Or, whatever. And what they're trying to see is, will you do the right thing when no one's looking? And it's not as simple and clear cut as someone saying, hey, if you were sitting at the computer and you had access to something you shouldn't have, would you report it, or would you sit there and do something, right? It's not as simple as that. A lot of times it's, hey, I noticed somebody else cut a corner and it could bite us in the butt later, but it's my friend and it's not that big a deal. And those ethical considerations come up actually a lot in real world, right? Somebody takes a little shortcut because they didn't want to spend the time, right? And that shortcut, could cause a problem, but the risk is so low that you're like, I get it, dude. He was busy, whatever, but you noticed it. Well, you have a couple options. Can you report it? Sure. Can you talk to the person? Sure. Can you fix it? Sure. Right? Those are the things they're trying to see is what are you trying to do? Are you going to try and cover it up, fix it, and then just say, hey, buddy, don't do that again? Are you going to just throw your team under the bus, right? It's a balance game, and it should be kind of a mix of both, right? You should talk to them. You should fix the issue. You should ensure it doesn't happen again, and you should report it in certain instances, right? So it's one of those things, where does your ethics lie? And that's what they're trying to figure out. So make sure you read up on them, because a lot of people don't understand that ethics aren't always as clear-cut as they think. And having a good code of ethics like this to reference will really help you, right? This is another one that I get all the time. Even when I'm interviewing people, I can't believe this one catches as many people off guard as it does. But think about, how do you stay up to date with cyber, right? One of the things that I find most interesting is I ask people all the time in interviews, how do you stay up to date with cyber? And almost every one of them gives me hardly an answer, right? Well, I get some threat feeds, or I, check these sites a couple times a day, and it's like, what are you talking about? That's how you stay up with cyber, is you just go to this random website once a day and you hope for it, right? There's nothing wrong. This is a common misconception. There's nothing wrong with saying, I watch these YouTubers, I get on this Reddit, I watch these podcasts, I do this, right? There's nothing wrong with that. A lot of times what I've heard from feedback from people is they're afraid to say those things because they think it's not a true source of, they think that the answer they're looking for is something along the lines of, hey, I'm part of this professional organization like ISC squared, and I start, getting that. That's not necessarily what they're looking for. They're looking to see, are you actually interested in this field? Are you dived in? Are you balls deep in this field? Or are you just, I'll get to it when I get to it. That's really what they're trying to find. So now we've talked about communication and mindset, but let's talk about the problem solving, right? These are the ones where you start getting in the more technical stuff, right? So the problem solving, something like describe a time you faced challenge, technical problem. How did you approach it? How did you solve it, right? So a couple of things happen here that I see that is good and bad. Some people get way too technical in the interview. And what I mean by that with way too technical is a lot of times if you deep dive into a technical problem that you had, but that technical problem is on an application or a server or something that company doesn't use and you're interviewing, they have no idea what you're talking about, right? If they're like, we use AWS, and you're like, I use Azure, or I've used Azure in the past, or GCP or whatever, and you're getting deep in the weeds of the management plane of Azure and blah blah blah. They're like, what the hell is this guy talking about, right? Because they're used to AWS. So keep it at enough level, or what I like to see people do is say, I use AWS because it's in the job description. Compare them. Say, hey, when I'm using Azure, we use this. I know in the AWS that's this, so that's the comparison, right? You don't have to say it that way, but you can say, yeah, one time I was troubleshooting a bucket in AWS, and in Azure that's called this, so right? Like, you can do that. And that way they know exactly what you're talking about. They know you know what you're talking about, and it shows that your skill sets transition to what they want, right? So that's one of the big things, is make sure when you're doing answering these questions, you have to prepare. And you have to prepare yourself to answer them in that mindset of, what are they looking for? Put yourself in their shoes, right? What are they asking? What are they trying to find out? What do they want to know, right? Another one is a lot of scenario-based questions. They'll say, like, walk me through your process of if you suspect a phishing attack on your organization, right? And they don't need you to go through every single tool. I see this all the time where, well, I would go to VirusTotal, or I would do this, and I would do... You don't need to go through that, because of the fact they might ask, what tools are you familiar with? And that's fine. But you might say, I would decompose the header. I would look at the source IPs, try to identify if they are known malicious, if the domain has been stood up recently, like those types of things all get the point across without having to dive into a tool that, once again, that company may use or may not use, may be familiar with, may not be familiar with, because in cyber there are thousands of tools, thousands for one task. So just know that, like, when you're answering these questions, answer them with that in mind, that you want to get in the weeds, but not so deep that you're losing the audience. It's the same as when you're teaching, when you're doing an interview, etc. So we've talked about the mindset, we've talked about the problem solving, the communication, right? So some of the questions they're going to ask you, these behavioral questions, is like, tell me about a time you failed at something. What did you learn? A lot of times what you start to see is these kind of quote unquote BS answers, right? Well, one time I failed because I worked so hard that I just couldn't work anymore. It was physically impossible, right? You get those answers. And it's like, what the heck are you talking about? You know what I mean? Like, that's got nothing to do with it. But what you can do is be honest, right? One time I failed, and this is a true story. I didn't do this, but I know somebody that did this, and so this is a true fail. And you learn from failure, right? So I remember one time, this was years and years and years ago when I was a sysad, and we had a Linux server, and there's a step in the Linux server where you delete something. I can't remember what it was. It's been so long. But they actually accidentally deleted the entire drive, because, as you know, in Linux, if you do sudo, or if you're on root, and you type rm, and then you don't finish the command, or you do rm with the root directory on accident because you forgot to finish the command, what happened was he was typing and he was going way too fast, and he typed rm and he put the root directory, and he was trying to tab something, and it didn't tab because he didn't put anything yet, and he hit enter too fast. It deleted the entire hard drive, okay? Now, some Linux has gotten a lot better about this, but just know these problems happen. It's a mistake. They're not going to be like, oh, this guy's an idiot. You tell them that's a real scenario where you failed hard, right? Tell them, what'd you learn? I learned that I was going too fast. My skill set my ego was above my skill set, right? I thought I was better than I was because I knew Linux very well. But even the best Linux users can make mistakes. So I need to slow down. I need to compose myself and understand what's at risk and take that into consideration when I'm moving forward, right? That is what they are looking for, right? Take it even further and say, I also then stayed after and rebuilt that server and did all this, blah, blah, because I made that mistake. It's not on somebody else to fix, right? So those are the behavioral questions. That's what they're looking for. They're looking for real answers. I promise you, you will look better if you're honest about your failures than if you say, nope, you know what? Actually, my one flaw is I'm actually too hard a worker. I know we've all heard that before, and it's kind of a joke, but honestly, there's a lot of answers that come in like that. Like I've heard, what's your biggest weakness? And a lot of people are like, well, when I get working, I just can't stop. I just don't know when to stop. And it's like, okay, cool. You're BSing, because I understand that might be true. I'm not saying you're a liar, but what I'm saying is that's not your biggest weakness. Your biggest weakness might be PowerShell, or it might be coding, or it might be whatever. But don't sit here and say, my biggest weakness is the fact that I am just such a hard worker that you'll never be able to get me to stop working. Like, okay, I get it. Your biggest weakness is your greatest strength. Yeah, we've heard that before. Don't BS. These are humans, right? These are normal people. Don't put so much pressure on yourself that you feel like you have to have these perfect answers. Be okay with making mistakes, because they know you're going to make mistakes in the real world just like everybody else. The goal is to stand out, and also to actually think, if I hire this person, guess what? This person will not, if they mess up, just try and sweep it under the rug or hide it or not say anything. They're looking for those people that when they mess up, they fess up and they fix it. That's what they're looking for. So that's the different types of questions you're going to get and how to answer them. But now we're going to get to asking questions and then soft skills. Excuse me. So first thing, what kind of questions are you asking? I can't tell you how many interviews I've been in where I interview somebody and I say, do you have any questions for us? And they say, no, I think I've pretty much got it. And it's like, how do you have it? You didn't ask us anything. You don't know what we do. You don't know what our work's like. You don't know anything. So that's insane that you didn't ask a question. That tells me that you're probably interviewing for hundreds of jobs or applying for hundreds of jobs, and you don't actually really care which one you get. I want the person that wants to work for my company, right? Think about it this way. If you went and interviewed right now, if you're in cyber, right, and TryHackMe was like, you want to come work for us? You'd probably be pretty excited, right? You'd probably be like, yes, okay, I'm going to nail this interview. I'm going to go through, I'm going to ask them about their, how they do this, and I'm going to be all excited and da-da-da. And the reality is you should treat every interview like that. If you're not, why would you expect to want to, if you don't want to work for my company, you just want to work, then go work somewhere else. I don't want, and that sounds harsh, but I don't want to hire someone because I have to have somebody, right? Just like I don't want somebody that doesn't want to be there. All right, so some of these questions, right? So one of the biggest things is I ask these people all the time, what are your biggest security challenges that your team is facing right now? Is it shortage of manpower? Is it time constraints? Is it budgetary? Is it the fact that maybe you've lost your one person that was really good at coding and now you don't have it, right? What is your biggest challenge that you're running into? Is it that you just have an abundance of alerts, right? Because it's going to tell you, it's going to shape. Think about this. You're interviewing as well. You're trying to find out if this job makes sense for you. It's going to shape what you're going to be doing. If the biggest issue that company's running into is the fact that, hey, we have a queue just full of alerts and we can't keep up, what do you think your job's going to be there? Just doing nothing but alerts. Is that what you want to do? If it is, cool. If it's not, maybe that's not the job for you. So understand that just because you think it's the job for you doesn't mean it is. So what opportunities are there for professional development within the security team? This is something that a lot of young entry-level people don't think about. They get to a job, they never ask this question, they start that job, 5 years go by, 10 years go by, and they're like, there's nowhere for me to go. I have to leave. I have to go get a different job. Well, that might not be a problem to some people, but it's a lot easier in life if you can progress through the company that you're at. I promise you, it's a lot easier. So ask those questions up front. Hey, what's the next step? It also shows that I'm looking at the next step, right? I know I'm going to crush this role. What's next for me? I want to know what's next, right? Lastly, some of the things I've asked is I've actually asked directly, can I interview somebody that's doing the job and just ask them a couple questions? And they'll say, yeah, sure, let me call one in, or, maybe we'll set something else up, whatever. But I want to know what a day in the life looks like, right? I want to know, honestly, what does your day look like? Because I want to know if this is something I want to do every day, right? Maybe, hey, could I shadow your team for a day? They may say no, but okay, that's fine. Ask them, and each interview will be different, right? You'll need to know. An example would be, I remember, and I've talked about this before, but I've interviewed, I interviewed for a startup a long time ago, and they wanted me to build out a pen testing course for them and all this other stuff, and they were throwing way too much money at me, and it raised red flags for me because I said, okay, they're throwing all this money at me, but there's something not right, because and you have to go with your gut in some of these. And what it was I said, let me think about it. And I looked and I thought about it, and I came up with some questions to ask them. And I said, let me interview your owner, right? Because it was a small startup. So they got the owner, and I'm talking to him, and I said, I was asking a bunch of questions, but I ended up asking, I said, how profitable are you? And he said, well, and I said, okay, like, if you can't tell me how profitable you are, I don't know how long this startup has. And he said, well, we're not profitable yet, but we're going to be profitable. We're projected to be profitable in, I don't remember, a year or 2 years, something like that. And I thought, okay. And that's not uncommon for a startup, right? So I wasn't like, oh my God, but I was like, okay, I understand. And I turned the roll down, and they said, well, here, we'll give you more money. And I said, it's not about the money. More important to me is job security than money. I don't care about the money. I care about enjoying what I do, getting really invested in what I do, and working there, staying there. That's what I appreciate. That's what I want. Not everybody wants that. Some people want the money. So they say, well, how much money is the cap for this role, right? That might be a question, right? So find what questions work for you, and make sure you're asking good questions, because you're interviewing for this job too, right? So now let's talk about soft skills. One of the things that I see a lot is the lack of soft skills. And it's really tough because I understand in IT, a lot of people are, very odd. We'll put it that way. That's putting it very nicely. And the reality is, if you don't have soft skills, it's really hard to work with you. It's just it's just reality, right? It's consensus. Like, think about trying to work with somebody that doesn't want to talk to people, doesn't want to deal with people. Well, if it's a team role, that's really hard to do. But you can learn that, right? Think about trying to communicate effectively. How do you communicate things? One of the questions I always ask in my interviews, if you guys have ever heard me talk about it, is explain something to me. And I always use something like DNS, because I know there's a lot of analogies out there, right? And I say, explain something to me, and a way that as if I was a third grader, right? Because that's a huge soft skill you have to have. You have to explain technical concepts to non-technical people. And I've had some good answers, but most people, it's funny, when you ask them to explain it, what do? Well, it turns an IP address into a domain name, and that's how they explain it. And you're like, okay, cool, thank you. And, it's an interview, so I'm not going to give them the answer right away, but that's not explaining it to a third grader. Does a third grader know what an IP address is or a domain name? Nope. Do you think a CEO does? Probably not. They probably know what it is, but they probably aren't correlating what you're saying. So if I'm gone that day and I'm the executive that briefs the CEO, somebody has to brief them. Can't be you now, because you just proved you can't do that. So who do I get? I'm going to get somebody that has soft skills and less technical skills probably. So understand that. You can work on these, right? Look, go to TED Talks, right? Search for communication. how I deal with communication breakdown. You don't have to be a CEO to be. All of these are quick snippets of how to improve your communication, right? Be better at communicating. There's never an excuse to be a bad communicator. There's never an excuse. I'll give you an example. I message my team on Teams. I'm sitting there, boom, 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 and I'm asking them to do something. They message me back and forth a couple times, and I go, wait a minute, there's a breakdown here. Something isn't right, meaning they're not understanding exactly, or I'm not understanding exactly. I call them right away. I'm not going to sit here and go back and forth and try to explain. And guess what? If you're the person that doesn't want to talk on the phone, I don't want you there, because that communication breakdown is going to happen a lot, and I don't want that, right? So go to TED Talks, look at communication, go to Toastmasters. If you've never heard Toastmasters, this is the international, right? Join the club. You can do presentations, right? You can mentor people. You can progress in your career. This is a huge, it's a huge thing in a lot of businesses, right? Toastmasters, TED Talks, they're great. There's never a reason to say I can't communicate, because it's just a lie. It's just, you don't want to. It's uncomfortable. And I understand it's uncomfortable. I don't like, this may surprise a lot of people, I don't like talking to a lot of people. It doesn't make me nervous. I'm not nervous at all. I don't like the attention. And so I don't have any issue doing it. I don't like it, right? But guess what? Anytime I get an opportunity to talk in front of a lot of people, I always do it. Why? Because it hones my skills. I practice. I get better and better. Like I said, I don't get nervous anymore, but I don't like it. You have to be okay with being uncomfortable. And that's one of the hardest things that a lot of people struggle with. And, if you don't do this, if you don't get better at communication, this is 95% of the time the reason I see technical folks miss out on opportunities. I see them interview for a job, and right away I'm like, they're not going to get it. Because when they're interviewing, you can tell they don't want to talk to you. You can tell they don't like it. You can tell. If I can tell that, guess what? When I'm in a meeting and you're telling everybody about this new thing you're coming out with or whatever for the company, they can tell that. If you look like you're not happy about being here and you're just in the interview, the thing is, it's regardless of what you feel. It's regardless of that. Perception is reality. Meaning, I don't care if you're like bubbling up with excitement and enjoyment inside your gut, but then that's fine, right? But then when you're sitting there, it doesn't look like I'm bubbling up with excitement, right? So it doesn't matter how you feel or what you think. It's how you're perceived, and that's perception. Perception is reality. So if you can't perceive like you're communicating effectively, like you're excited to be there, that type of thing, your progression in any industry is going to be very null, because at a certain point, you're going to hit a cap where, okay, I need you to be kind of facing people now. And you're going to be like, oh, I don't want to do that. And that's fine. But understand, when you're interviewing, you have to get in front of people. You have to look excited. You have to be, enjoy what you're doing. So that's the verbal piece of it, right? A lot of times I see the nonverbal be issues too. I see times where people are fidgety, and that's okay. Nerves is a real thing, but it starts to become distracting, right? If you're clicking a pen, if you're shaking, if you're doing stuff like that, that's when it starts to become a problem. So record yourself doing an interview, do a mock interview with AI. There's all kinds of platforms, and I'm not going to give you the sources for mock interviews for AI, only because guess what? I do mock interviews in my Patreon. So if you want a real mock interview, go ahead and join the Patreon, hit me up. We'll do a mock interview. I've done them for a ton of people. It helps out a lot. So if you want to do those, do mock interviews and record it. Go back and look and go, would you hire this guy? And the thing is, a lot of times it's being honest with yourself. Be very honest with yourself. Look at yourself, and I'll be honest. It's one of the reasons I don't like watching my videos, because I have to be honest with myself. I have to say, shoot, I did mess up here. I did something wrong here. I don't like this, right? And I'm a very hypercritical person to myself, but in the reality, it always improves. So it's one of those things. Watch yourself and say, would I hire that guy? Maybe, right? If it's a maybe, then fix why you wouldn't, right? If you see the things that are bright lights, right? Like you're like, that looks really good. Do that again. Keep doing that. Integrate that with everything you do. So these are all things that can help you really progress your cyber career field, especially when you're interviewing. But I see nonstop people talking about how, oh, I never get interviews, blah, blah. And then they finally get interviews and they're like, well, I got through, 4 interviews or whatever. Then they didn't call me back. And it's all excuses, right? At the end of the day, that's what it is. It's an excuse. You weren't the best, right? For what they needed. You might say, oh, I was the best because I have 20 years experience. They might not want someone with 20 years experience. That might be their problem, right? Their problem might be we have so many experienced guys that we're not getting any new ideas. If that's their problem, they're not going to hire that guy. So understand you're not the best for what they need. So if you want to be the best for what they need, tailor it to what they need, right? Take your interview and say, hey, this is what they're looking for. Let me interview that way. Let me look at who's interviewing me, go to their LinkedIn page, look at what their background is. They're a security-minded person. Let me make sure all my answers are tailored to security. There's another person in there that's a networking background. Let me tailor a lot of my answers to networking, right? Do some social engineering and understand how that plays a part in this, right? Now, for anyone right now, I'm just going to, this is pretty much the end of the video. If that's all you needed, awesome, drop off. But for anyone right now that is watching this video and says, that is so much, there's too much here. It's too complex to do all this for an interview. It's too much work and it's too crazy to do for a job, right? You're going to fail. It's just the way it is. Maybe it's not in the interview, maybe it's not there, but you're not going to be successful because if you're not willing to do that much work to get your dream job, you don't deserve it, right? It's not that much work. It's not. You practice it. You get better at it. You keep repeating it. If you're sitting here going, nah, don't need to do all this. You only need to do a couple of things and you'll get the interview, right? Cool. I wish you luck. But if that's how you're treating the interview, then how do you treat the job? It's a mindset the same way, right? If I'm going into an interview, I'm going to be the best. If I'm going into a job, I'm going to be the best. If I'm going into a new skill, I'm going to be the best. That's it. It's not difficult. It's not complex. If you're sitting here going, you don't need to do all that, right? Then that's where you will be. You will be there for the rest of your career. You may progress. You may even succeed a little bit, but you will never be where you could be. And understand that. So take this, everything I said, understand how to apply it. And if you guys have questions, join the Discord and ask questions. I will definitely help you guys. If you guys want mock interviews, join the Patreon, right? The resources are here. So find out what works for you when you're interviewing. Even if you get successful, if you get the job, ask for your feedback on those interviews, right? This will continually progress into a feedback loop of where you're taking what you're learning and you're applying it and you're getting better and better and better. And then next thing you know, you can write your ticket to any job you want and you can actually really succeed. So hopefully this helps you guys, and hopefully you guys can take this and go into the interviews with a new light. Thanks, guys.